The war chamber smelled like recycled air and cold authority. Holographic star maps floated above the crescent-shaped table, each point of light a flickering crisis. Kedros 9 pulsed red in the corner, a silent moon now blind and voiceless. "They've taken another Accord outpost," hissed Counselor Zav of the Kithari. His voice carried the usual mix of panic and condescension. 14 species lost personnel. The Sithraxians make a mockery of diplomacy. No response from orbital sensors. No heat signatures. No debris, said a Zalari analyst. They didn't bomb it. They erased it. Voices tangled. Do we retaliate? Do we wait? Do we investigate? A dozen alien languages argued the semantics of war while the humans sat still, hands folded, eyes unmoving. At the far end of the table, Earth's envoy stood. He wore no insignia, just a matte black coat and expressionless stare. He raised a finger. "We already sent someone." The chamber fell silent. Elian Voss watched the planet rise through the viewport of his drop pod. Kedros 9 looked pale, dust gray and pockmarked with old craters, barely holding an atmosphere. A forgotten moon, until the Sithraxians moved in. The mission brief was simple. Objective: neutralize hostile threat on Kedros 9. Secondary: send a message. Communication: none. Extraction: not guaranteed. He thumbed the ignition bead embedded in his glove. No countdown. No fanfare. The pod ejected with a thunderous push, his body slamming against the harness as he shot toward the dead moon like a bullet. Inside, silence. Elian's breathing was steady. The pod shook violently as it entered atmosphere. Kedros 9 didn't fight back. That was worse than flak. Worse than detection. It meant they wanted him down there. He checked his gear: knife, sidearm, no rounds, field torch, protein tabs. No backup. No AI. Not even a live feed. He didn't need one. The pod punched into the surface like a meteor, grinding through loose soil and rust-colored sand before settling in a crater of its own making. The hatch hissed. Elian stepped out. Nothing. No wind. No birds. No engine hum. The landscape stretched in fractured ridges and ironwood trees, their bark glistening black under a pale violet sun. They twisted upward like tortured bone. A kilometer away, he spotted the Accord outpost. He moved. The outpost wasn't bombed. It was peeled. The perimeter wall was torn apart, slabs of composite alloy tossed like scrap. Blood painted the main walkway in arcs, dried now to a deep brown. Voss passed a corpse nailed to the outer fence with its own femur. Inside, nothing moved. No bodies lay where they fell. Instead, they were arranged, kneeling, arms splayed, faces lifted to the sky in mocking worship. A warning. He swept the interior with infrared. Cold. No power. The barracks had been stripped, the weapons racks emptied. He found a shattered helmet with a tooth lodged inside the visor. Not human. Reptilian. Sithraxian. He knelt beside a blood trail leading out through the east gate. Drag marks. Something big. The direction aligned with the topography skinned from his brief, toward the cliffs, and below them, a heat bloom. Deep. Underground. Predictable. Voss muttered. Hours passed as he stalked through the black forest. The ironwood trees were sharp-edged and dense, forcing him to move low. Their roots coiled above the surface like veins, brittle to touch. He paused every 20 meters, checking for signs: disturbed soil, scent trails, sap marks. The forest was too quiet. Movement to the left. He dropped, exhaled, waited. 2 Sithraxian scouts moved between the trunks. They were armored in bone mesh and smelled of ash. He noted their gait, high-ankled, fast twitch movement. No coordination. Confidence made them sloppy. Voss watched them pass, then moved parallel. He set his first trap 30 meters ahead, tripwire strung low across jagged roots, fastened to a fragmentation shard embedded in tree bark. He circled wide. A low snap. Scream. The first scout fell, legs shredded. The second turned too late. Voss was already behind him. One arm around the throat. A twist. Silence. He dragged the bodies into the undergrowth, removed the bone sheath from one of their rifles. Too light, too organic. He dropped it. Instead, he took the dagger from the fallen scout. Ritual blade. Still stained. He impaled it in the second one's chest, anchoring a strip of his own ration pack into the wound. On it in red, "I see you." Far away, on the upper ridge of a jagged bluff, Warlord Kotal Drar observed the heat blip vanish from his sensor slate. He smiled. His teeth were thin, jagged, curved like blades. "Has he started?" asked his second-in-command. Kotal didn't answer. He stepped toward a massive bone table, etched with human anatomy. He pointed to the chest. "Here," he said. "This is where they keep their soul. If I break it, he becomes a husk. But he is alone." Kotal turned. "So was his kind on Titan. Until the ice bled. Until my brother was burned alive in his command nest by a human he never saw coming." He slammed a claw into the table. "This ghost fights differently. Not with honor. Not with banners. With silence." He tapped the slate again. "Send the Bone Guard west. Burn the trees. I want him forced into the hive." The second-in-command hesitated. "You mean to lure him?" "No," Kotal growled. "I mean to cage him. And when he claws, I will be watching." As twilight fell, Kedros 9 dimmed to deep shadows and frost-tinted mist. Voss took shelter beneath a decaying transport husk. He sat without a fire, motionless, sharpening the edge of his blade against a broken armor plate. Above him, the stars blinked in distant cold. He didn't look up. He didn't pray. He just waited. The sky bled a low, sulfuric orange as Voss descended toward the sinkhole on Kedros 9's eastern face. The terrain had changed. Gone were the jagged ironwoods and dry ravines. Here, the soil pulsed faintly, breathing heat in steady, unnatural rhythms. The surface was alive, or close to it. He paused at the crater's lip, crouching low. A cold draft rose from the darkness below, thick with rot and something floral. Alien. Familiar only in the worst way. The hive pits. They were on no public accord record, but Voss had seen the briefing files, classified even from most Earth Command. The Sithraxians had converted a deep mining colony into a living foundry, breeding experimental warbeasts, splicing genetics, studying psychological torture. He slid down silently, talons of dark stone scraping beneath his boots. A massive structure waited at the base, half buried in sludge, veined with glowing blue lines. Organic scaffolding, half steel, half bone, stretched from the walls like veins feeding a heart. The gates were open. Inside, heat clung to him like sweat. The walls shimmered with a pulsing bioluminescent fluid, alive with twitching fibers. The floor beneath him thumped, subtle, rhythmic, as if matching a pulse. He moved deeper. Corridors twisted like intestines, narrowing and expanding without symmetry. Noise was distant, low hisses, wet clicks, the occasional rumble like something dragging across stone. Voss placed one hand on the wall. It vibrated softly, reacting to his presence. Movement ahead. He pressed against the curved side of the corridor as two figures passed. Not Sithraxian. Taller. Slimmer. For limbs, jointed backward. Skin translucent. Experimental assets. They didn't speak. They sniffed the air as they walked. He waited until the sound faded, then moved again. The breeding chamber opened like a wound in the rock. He stood at the edge, watching. Cages, hundreds, lined the circular walls, stacked like cells in a hive. Inside them, creatures paced, shrieked, or lay still, waiting. Some were reptilian. Others were hybrids of accord species, twisted with tech and muscle. One creature blinked, three lids slow, mechanical. In the center, a pit of dark liquid churned as eggs rose and sank. The air shimmered with chemicals. Voss noted everything: vent points, guard patterns, structural weak spots. Time to light the fuse. He moved to a side corridor and set his charges, 2 magnetic dead caps attached to the load-bearing roots that anchored the breeding floors. The whine of pressure boots behind him stopped his hands. He rolled left as a spiked bolt split the wall. One of the hybrid guards had flanked him, no vocal alarm, just a raised blade and empty eyes. Voss reacted fast. Dropped low. Swept the legs. Drove his boot into the creature's throat. It spasmed, gurgled. Too loud. Another shape barreled from the corridor. Voss barely ducked under the swing, too strong to take head-on. He backed up into the breeding pit's edge. 2 more emerged. All different. All engineered. No way through. No way up. He threw a signal spike across the room. It embedded into the flesh wall and emitted a low, pulsing vibration. The cells responded. Creatures screamed, thrashed, clawed. One cage burst open, a 3-armed brute crashing out in rage. In the chaos, Voss sprinted. The hybrids lunged, but the stampede behind them was worse. He dove into the access tunnel and triggered the charges. The ceiling groaned. Then fire. The entire chamber detonated behind him in a bloom of soundless heat. Shockwaves collapsed the corridor. He didn't look back. Just ran. He emerged from a collapsed ventilation shaft, dragging his body through ash and melted bone. Smoke curled around him. Blood smeared his armor, his and others. His shoulder had been clipped. Heat scorched half his right arm. Pain blurred the edges of his vision. He collapsed behind a ridge of black stone. Breathe. Count. Move. He pulled a stim injector from his belt and slammed it into his thigh. The burning faded. Focus returned. He looked up. The hive was in flames. Fire danced through the cracks in the earth like veins of anger. But something else burned in his mind. A spike. Sudden. Unnatural. He staggered. His vision twisted. For a moment, he wasn't on Kedros 9 anymore. He was home. Earth. Rain on steel. The scent of scorched ozone and gunpowder. His squad. Ghosts now. One turned toward him, half a face missing. Elian! It rasped. He blinked hard. The hallucination melted into static. Realized it wasn't memory. It was transmission. He tore off his helmet. Felt behind his right ear. Something pulsed under the skin. He dug his fingers in, ignoring the fresh pain. Pulled. The thing came free, a sliver of metal, warm and twitching. A listening device. Not Cythraxian. A Cortec. Tagged him before launch. To observe. Study. A recorded voice activated. Behavioral data log, Ghost Operative Voss. Emotional suppression under extreme duress confirmed. Continue monitoring. Another voice, Earth Command. Cold. Detached. Ensure subject progresses toward target. Do not extract. Subject is not to return. His eyes hardened. Not your subject, he muttered. He crushed the device under his heel. Elsewhere, in a dark chamber lined with bone icons, Katal Drar watched the burning hive on a screen of stretched membrane. The flames flickered in his eyes. 4 breeding tiers destroyed. Genetic stock compromised. Katal didn't blink. He's wounded? Yes. Confirmed. Cameras lost him at the exit ridge. We estimate. He's no longer an operative. Katal interrupted. He's a wound. A blister under the skin. He turned to the edge of the room where 5 shadowed figures waited. Release the bone guard. Not to kill. To bleed him. To show him what fear tastes like. The figures moved in unison. Barefoot. Silent. Katal smiled. Now we become myth. Voss knelt beside a dead stream, the water black and still. He removed a cracked plate of armor and splashed the icy liquid against his wound. He cut cloth into strips. Wrapped the gash tight. He didn't speak. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Instead, he picked up a jagged piece of hive resin, carved a line into his helmet's side. One for Kedros 9. One for the hive. One for the betrayal. He stared into the reflection of his own bloodied face in the water. There were no gods here. Only men. Smoke coiled behind Voss like a second shadow. He moved across the scorched ridgeline, one hand pressed to his side, the other gripping a jagged bone shard wrapped in cloth. His rifle was gone. The hive explosion had cost him that, along with most of his upper armor. His left pauldron was fused, ribs bruised, shoulder torn raw, but he was still breathing. And he was close. The war camp stretched below him in a crescent of firelit tents, spiked towers, and bone palisades. At the center, a raised command dais stood like a stage. There, under a canopy of stretched hide, Katal Drar preached to his soldiers like a prophet of violence. Voss crouched at the edge of the cliff, watching through a cracked optic lens. The warlord was armored in obsidian-plated scales, ceremonial and thick. A heavy axe hung at his back. 2 guards flanked him, massive Sithraxians with ritual markings seared into their flesh. Behind them stood cages of prisoners, accord species and humans alike. Katal raised his claw. They say the human came alone. The camp fell silent. They say he moves like a phantom, kills like an animal. They say fear follows him. Let me show you truth. He turned to one of the cages and dragged a human forward, barely alive, bloodied. A young recon scout, from the looks of his tattered gear. He is not a god, Katal growled, lifting the man by the throat. He bleeds. And so will all of them. The scout gasped, kicked, then went still. Katal tossed the corpse into the fire pit below, sending sparks into the black sky. Voss didn't flinch. But his jaw tightened. It was time. He entered the camp from the north, using the chaos of Katal's ceremony to move unseen. There was no finesse now, only precision. He moved like a scalpel in muscle, slicing through tents, planting charges on fuel drums and heat exchangers. He bypassed guards, left warning glyphs carved into corpses. Fear spread before him like a disease. One Sithraxian spotted him near the barracks. Voss ducked behind cover, waited for the patrol to pass, then dropped a weighted torch flare at their feet. The explosion lit the camp's northern edge in a wave of fire. Alarms shrieked. Soldiers scrambled. And from the west came others, the Bone Guard. They moved like ghosts in perfect silence. 5 figures, tall and sinewed, their eyes glowing faint blue under bone masks. Their weapons weren't standard issue, blades fused to arms, flesh braided with steel. Voss moved fast, ducking into the broken remains of a Sithraxian feeding hall. He heard them following, soft, rhythmic steps. No radio chatter. Just instinct and purpose. One dropped from the ceiling. He parried the first strike with his forearm, barely deflecting the serrated edge. The Bone Guard moved with unnatural speed. Another came through the wall, shoulder-tackled him into a pile of crates. Dust rose. Voss rolled left, kicked one in the knee, and felt it give, partially mechanical. He drove his bone shard into the weak point and twisted. Sparks burst from the leg. It didn't scream. Another one grabbed his throat, lifting him. Voss shoved a smoke pellet into its open mouth and activated it. The head burst like a sealed cannon fire. 3 left. He didn't run. The third Bone Guard came at him with 2 blades spinning. Voss ducked the first arc, let the second slice across his arm, then grabbed the wrist mid-motion and redirected the spin, using the Bone Guard's momentum to slam it face first into the wall. As it staggered, he punched the hilt of his blade through its eye. 2 remained. They circled. One fainted left. The other came from behind. He went low. Felt the air sing above his head. Grabbed dirt. Flung it backward. The one behind him hesitated, blinded. Voss tackled it, stole its blade mid-grapple, and drove it through the neck joint. The last one stepped back. It tilted its head, not in fear, calculation. Then it ran. Katal's throne room overlooked the carnage. The camp was in chaos. Fires raged. Bone Guard were down. Soldiers screamed in every direction. The last Bone Guard arrived, dragging itself, wounded. Katal drew his axe. No, he said. This part is mine. He stepped down from the dais. Voss stood before the platform, blood trailing from his side. Kotal descended slowly, eyes locked. I expected something greater, the warlord said. They call you myth. But here you are. Bleeding. Alone. Voss stared back, expression flat. You talk too much. Kotal grinned. I'll carve your spine into a banner. He swung. The axe cleaved air. Voss stepped in, slashed upward with the stolen blade. Sparks burst from Kotal's pauldron. The warlord pivoted, drove his elbow into Voss's chest. Bone cracked. Voss dropped, rolled, came up under Kotal's swing, planted his knife deep in the warlord's thigh. Kotal roared. Grabbed Voss by the neck. You're just flesh, he bellowed. Voss spat blood. And you're just noise. He pulled a hidden blade from his boot and stabbed into the warlord's exposed armpit, an old vulnerability, ignored in Sithraxian honor fights. Kotal staggered. Voss kicked him backward. The warlord dropped his axe, coughing, wheezing. Voss moved in close. No speech. No hesitation. He tackled him, straddled the chest, and began punching. Hard. Fast. Rhythmic. Metal met bone. Bone gave. Kotal tried to speak. Voss didn't let him. He drove the blade through the warlord's throat and twisted until it stopped moving. Silence followed. The fires still burned, but no soldiers approached. Those still alive had seen enough. Voss stood slowly, breath ragged. He dragged Kotal's body to the throne and sat it upright. Pulled a canister of acidic etch and sprayed one message across the front in 2 languages. Humans don't fight like animals. Animals fight to survive. We fight to win. 3 days later, an Accord observation team landed on Kedros 9. They found the camp in ruins. Over 200 Sithraxian corpses. The hive pits burned to glass. No prisoners alive, but no humans dead, either. One survivor, a Sithraxian scribe, was found hiding beneath a gutted barracks. He spoke only once before requesting execution. He hunted us. He didn't scream. He didn't roar. He just ended us. They asked for his name. The scribe whispered. He has none. He is the war.